You have accessed the podcast of OA, located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will. The podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lanterns Myron, Rumsey, and Bill Giancoli, the podcast of OA begins now.
Welcome back to the podcast of OA. I'm Bill Giancoli, and I'm joined, as always, with Myron Rumsey, the creator and operator of the blog of OA. Myron, how are you tonight?
I'm doing really well. Happy 2017, everybody. We're in
happy 20. I forgot we are in 2017.
Yeah.
How many times have you had to scratch 2016 off something you were writing and put 2017?
Not once. Not once. Yeah. So far. Of course, I've just jinxed it. So, of course, tomorrow all day I'll be ready 2016. You watch.
Well, we're starting off 2017 with our 110th episode. So that's 110 hours of us speaking about Green Lantern. And we're getting into more of Green Lanterns with Jessica and Simon and the Phantom Lantern. We kind of know how we all feel about that. And then we have some fan mail, lots of fan mail to
yes, and some really good ones, really good ones. People answering some questions and things that you and I talked about in episode 109 about Volthoom and Kyle and so we got some really great listeners' emails. I'm more excited about talking about the emails than I am talking about the books.
Oh, all right. And we're gonna get back into the Hal Jordan and Green Lanterns 10 and 11, where we have some big developments and a great little twist. An old familiar character is back and rearing his ugly orange head, if you will. And so what do you say we get right into some of these comics?
I think so. I do want to take one quick pause before we go into the books. On a personal note, you and I kind of chatted a little bit about the subject before we recorded, but January is esophageal atresia and tracheoesophageal fistula Awareness Month, or EATEF for short. And this is a very rare birth defect. Only 1 in 4,000 people in the entire world are born with it every year. 4,000 people in the entire world are born with it every year. And for me, it's very personal because that's what I was born with back in 1964. And it was back then. It was very rare because most people died from it, and it's just an awareness month. So I'm just going to share that with folks. I'll probably put a link to information about it for anybody who's interested. Not that it's not a charity thing. There's no telethon. Nobody's raising money. It's just getting the awareness out there so that people are aware of what it's about. So thank you for indulging me for about a minute and a half or so, or whatever, to talk about it. But it's something that's personal to me, and this January happens to be the month that's the awareness month, so it's been on my mind a lot. So I just wanted to share it with the listeners, and I hope people will indulge me for that little bit. But let's get started talking about some Green Lantern comics.
Will do.
This is Salak, Green Lantern of Sector 1418, and you are receiving the podcast of OA.
The podcast of OA.
So we're going to kick off this episode talking about Green Lanterns, and we're talking about the last 2 chapters in the Phantom Lantern, and we really see Frank Leminski go through some gyrations in these 2 issues before he comes to a rather interesting demise, so to speak. So, Bill, before I share what I think, I want you to talk about what you think. So what was your opinion of those 2 issues?
Honestly, again, I think what we have to remember is this is a professionally made comic. It looks good, it's done professionally, it's written professionally and everything. But I think you and I have come to the consensus that it just doesn't work for us. We're not buying into either of the characters or some of the story choices that they're making. And but we keep supporting it and we keep giving it money. And so we do appreciate what it is. However, there's some things that just seem, for me, that it's not even like I feel like we're given a little bit of appreciation back. With some of and what I mean is like and I'm not saying you have to like listen to what we say about it and you have to change. I'm not actually. Is it Ben Humphries?
Sam Humphries, yes.
Sam Humphries, yes. Sam, great name. My son's name. So, so Sam Humphries, is writing, he's making choices, but there's part of you that you want like, okay, so they're gonna battle this Phantom Lantern. Make this a great battle. And yeah, he throws a twist in there, but it's a twist that just doesn't. It's just like, it's a little bit of a letdown in that if Jessica is gonna overcome great fear, have her overcome great fear with like a freight train coming out of a Tyrannosaurus Rex mouth with missiles on it. Like have it like something so like we're like, wow, how did she take down that Phantom Lantern? And then the Phantom Lantern, even when he takes it off with compassion and realizes like, no, Simon, instead of using his Green Lantern ring, butts the guy, like shoulder butts the guy. And then the guy, like, Frank Lemosky, like, is able to really throw off a Green Lantern by swiping sand in his eyes. And it's those, like, things. It's like, I don't know. I couldn't buy into a consistency of rooting for any of these characters because they did feel a little weak. And I understand you're like a newbie and everything, but Simon Bass has dealt with Sinestro. And he's been off-world. Jessica Cruz, I can kind of understand it. But now we're sitting here and this yellow, she's fighting one of the yellow constructs from Frank Lemosky. And it's this kind of a really scary looking version of her. And she's fighting it off, and while she's concurrently with her flying in a force field fighting this off, the things that are really hurting her feelings is that this demon's like, you're not good enough, or you're a loser, And it's like, I can't buy, how can you be flying there in a force field and with a ring and defending yourself and going, oh man, she's right, I'm such a loser. Or that how can you not have some confidence to even be like, I can float off the ground in my own force field? You have to have a little bit of, an edge to take chances like that. And to then have an issue where you are filled with anxiety and fear. I don't know. It's hard for me to buy and grasp. And I'm like, I understand that maybe other people can hold on to that, but what I'm asking is, okay, if you're going to get that kind of character in there, that's fine, but let's have, when she overcomes it, be spectacular, and not even when she still hasn't been able to do a construct, and it's like these, you described them as ribbons. I don't know. It fell a little bit flat. So where do we go from here with Jessica Cruz, really?
Well, I guess that's one of the big questions. The last arc, when they were in the Hell Tower and she's finally able to use her ring, it was this big epic moment personally for her. It wasn't visually quite that grand, but for her personally, it was an epic moment. And then we got regression, and we had the same thing this time. And I really hope I realize we're only 2 arcs in, but I really hope that this doesn't become the formula for every story in which, I go through this whole thing, question myself, and then I knew I had it in me all along kind of thing at the end. I really hope it doesn't get to that point. I don't think it will. I don't think Sam Humphries is that kind of a lazy writer. But it did feel a little after school special-ish for me when it was the whole, I knew all along I had it in me, and the ring just confirmed it for me kind of thing. For me, it didn't work, but that's because I don't relate to the character in the first place. I'm not connected to her on an emotional level. I quite honestly don't care about her one way or the other. I agree exactly with your point, Bill, though, that Simon Baz is not the newbie that he's constantly being portrayed as. He's been to the edge of oblivion. He's fought God, Godhead. He's fought the new gods. And here,
really.
Here he shoulder butts the guy. I think for me, the Frank Leminski journey was interesting. When he got to the point where he got possessed by the indigo light, and he started almost to see the true him, if that really was the true him underneath the surface of being so completely obsessed with being a Green Lantern. You kind of got to see some of the real humanity in Frank. And I think ultimately Frank Leminski was a guy who wanted to be a good guy, but he lost his way, And for me, I thought it would have been... Do you know what would have been the perfect ending for me? Would have been for Jessica to have talked him out of it. To have talked him out of wearing the ring. That would have been, to me, no fist thrown, no constructs, a more personal journey, a more dramatic story. Because Frank got such a quick fall from grace. It would have been great to have seen him really gotten some achievement out of it and then had that epic fall.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say that almost sounds more interesting. Again, sounds more interesting in theory.
Yeah, in theory.
But I think it's hard for me to get over the self-conscious superhero. I kind of get the whole teenager angst, like you don't want to be different and everything. But you don't want to be different, but you're just out there in the open doing these things, and I don't know. I can't buy her level of anxiety that she has. It's not like I would say with the Peter Parker, and I've heard that argument. It's like it's like Peter Parker, Spider-Man, but he wasn't suffering from like anxiety or anything. He was just young and naive and scared,
Right.
And that's that I can believe,
Yeah.
Like to her level, the level that they're trying to write her at to connect with these very, people who have, psychosis with, insecurities and things that enable them to live normal lives, quote unquote normal lives, it's almost damning to the thought of being a superhero, because a superhero, even at the weakest levels, is willing to take that chance forward. And it seems like she's going from 0 to 60 really, really fast.
Right. Well, you made it. One of the comments you said was, "Where do we go from here?" And the problem with a character who's built on this premise of having the anxiety and having to overcome it is eventually she has to overcome it, right? Eventually she has to stop being this, or she's got no character growth. Where do you go from there? I mean, that's the problem that DC has right now with Kyle Rayner. They don't know what to do with him because, he's no longer, he can't be the guy he was when he first started. He can't. You can't go backwards like that. So what do you do with a character like Kyle who has reached godhood-like power levels? What kind of stories are there left to tell with him? What can you do? And you can't keep him with the rookie piece. So how do you keep him interesting for people? And I think that's been one of the reasons why DC's really struggled with what to do with Kyle, because they don't know how to go forward with him. And I hope they figure that out, because he has fans that have been, they stuck with him through, 10 years of him being the main guy. I don't want to see anything bad happen to Kyle, but at the same time, what are you going to do with him? And when it comes to Jessica, I almost feel the same way. Where are you going to go with this character? And to me, I get for a lot of people that they connect with Jessica on a very personal and emotional level, because maybe they can relate to her for their own reasons because of things that go on in their life. But to be frank, it's not very entertaining reading. And that's just, I'm sorry, it's not. But
again, that's of your and I's opinion.
Right,
like we said, there are people who are probably very happy with this, and that's fine. But I think if you had to categorize this, we're looking at probably, I would be interested to see. Granted, I'm not going to go out and do these statistics. I got enough to worry about in my life, but the average age of people who say they do like Jessica Cruz and everything, as opposed to those who don't. And I think that would be very telling, because we do see the end game is not going to be good here.
Right.
Because it's either you're going to end up, like you said, she overcomes the hurdle. How can you top overcoming the hurdle?
Right. Are you going to constantly regress and have to replay it? And that's what I don't want to see happen. But that aside, there were a couple of things that I thought were interesting, and a couple of things that, from a story structure perspective, and just, I don't want to use the word continuity, but consistency, bothered me a little bit. One was the origin we saw of the Green Lantern rings, where Rami, we see the story of the Volthoom becoming a major threat, and Rami opens this case up of Green Lantern rings, and that's the origin of where the Green Lantern rings come from, and it kind of flies in the face of what we knew before, because what we've always come to know about Green Lantern history was that the rings were designed as an answer to the Manhunters. And this seems to fly in the face of it, but if I sit back and really think about it, we know what all we know is what the Guardians have told us. So we know they're not exactly the most forthcoming when it comes to information. So this version of history could very well be true, and maybe after they dealt with Volthoom, those rings were locked away until the Manhunters came along, and then they brought the Green Lantern Corps forward. Who knows? At first, it really kind of bothered me, and then I really sat back and thought, this is a version of history, and history lies with the people who want to say what the history is. It lies with the victors. It so what we know is only what the Guardians have told us, and who's to say what they've told us is true? So I kind of give that a pass. But one of the parts that really kind of bothered me was in this last issue, when Vath Sarn and Isamat Cole show up, and the whole interaction between the two of them and Jessica and Simon, I realize that these books are not occurring concurrently in real time, because obviously for Isamat Cole, who we saw in Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps #8 was the last time we saw him in print, he was with the group of people that went to Zudar, and he's in the Bottled Light piece. And the Green Lanterns weren't back long enough before then for this story in Green Lanterns to take place before Bottled Light. So it has to take place after Bottled Light. And so part of me is wrestling with the idea that, okay, the Green Lanterns are back on Mogo. Bottled Light's over with. Nobody's ever thought of checking in with Simon and Jessica since then to see how they're doing. Mm-hmm. So I kind of wrestled with that a bit. And that bothered me from not continuity, but from consistency, because what we know is going on in one book should be somewhat accurately reflected, or at least it should make some sense. So that bothered me a bit. I was a little initially bothered by Isamat Cole's character design, because it went back to the New 52 version of Isamat Cole, whereas we've seen him in several appearances in the Hal Jordan the Green Lantern Corps book, and he's got more of the movie style design. So there's almost, I don't know whether it's lack of communication or just artist interpretation, because we do have Sornik Natu changing hairstyles depending on who's drawing her. So, I don't want to take too much into it, but it would be nice if there was consistency. And
well, that's a Cora Guardian thing.
Yeah.
Her hair changes as time goes. No, I mean, I don't know. This book, like you said, I think the Phantom Ring with Frank Lemansky, it brings you to this point where you're like, okay, maybe there could be some potential here, but then it seems to make a turn away from what you would hope that potential would be. And for that, I'm kind of left with this, like, well, we'll continue to go and see this now, but it's going to be, I have a feeling the cycle's going to be now we're going to see Jessica kind of I have a feeling Volthoom's going to play up the history that she's had with Volthoom, and correct me if I'm wrong. He kind of was speaking to her, and he kind of played into her anxieties, correct?
Right. As Power Ring, she was possessed by Volthoom's ring. So, one of the things we haven't talked about in our conversation about these two issues was what happens with Volthoom and Rami, where Volthoom takes over Rami's body, and so nobody but us, the reader right now, know that Volthoom is in Rami's body, and so Rami's going to train them, air quote. So, is he going to get into Jessica's head? To me, that was the one thing that came out of this story that was interesting. Is what is Volthoom's game going to be? What's his overall plan? Because throughout this entire story, we know he's had some reason why he wanted Rami, and we understand that part now. But we still don't know after this entire story what is it Volthoom is out to get. And
right.
So I'm interested in that part of it, to be very honest. But I don't know. It's interesting that the first arc I was really more interested in the Red Lanterns and the Hellseed and that stuff, and in this arc I was more interested in Frank Leminski than I am. In both cases, I'm more interested in the antagonists than the protagonists.
Yeah, I really. And Rami's kind of an interesting character, especially he gets play in both, titles.
Right.
So I wonder if it's an intentional change of the origins.
It could very well be. We'll see.
This is Razor, and you are listening to the blog of Oa. You need to keep listening. Otherwise, I will track you down with all of my skill, and you will feel my wrath.
So, Myron, I think this might be a record for us, but 5 emails, and not just you're like, hey, we love you, Myron, especially Bill, he's awesome, kind of emails. we're talking about like real, like well thought out, hard hitting emails that are even going to challenge you. So, Myron, how about we get started with our friend from Russia?
Yes, this is from Andrei Kuleshov, and he says, "Hi, Myron and Bill. I'm really glad that you keep releasing new episodes of the podcast of OA because I've already listened to most of its episodes multiple times." He's a glutton for punishment. It's great to listen to it while I'm working, and I just didn't enjoy any other podcast about comic books, so I figured I'd start listening to the old episodes of Podcast of OA for the second time instead. I wanted to ask you, what do you think about this green dimension with dead Green Lanterns in recent issues of the Hal Jordan and Green Lantern Corps book? I think that it was a great dramatic moment. It was so sad for me to remember that all of these great characters are dead. Also, I noticed that this sequence in this dimension almost completely repeats that sequence from Jeff Johns' run in which Hal Jordan and Sinestro got inside of Black Hand's ring. I'm assuming that Robert Venditti did it intentionally, and I would love to know more about it. I think Robert Venditti is doing a great job since this relaunch. I had some problems with his work on Green Lantern, like this emotional reservoir thing. I hope it gets retconned or something like that. But I'm really happy with what he's doing with this series right now, and I'm glad that he's the one who's writing this book. And I have mixed feelings about the Green Lantern series. I hate that continuity often gets ignored in this book, and I can't understand why it gets ignored. It's one thing when continuity gets ignored if it's allowed to tell a better story or to fix something from the past, but it's another thing when it happens for no reason and just because writer lacks knowledge about the mythos. While reading this comic, I feel almost as if it took place in some kind of alternate Earth. Also, I liked your thoughts about Jessica Cruz, that she would work better if she wasn't a Green Lantern. In fact, I have similar difficulties in socializing, almost like Jessica Cruz or Mogo, so I should be able to relate to her, but I just don't see her as the Green Lantern, and it makes me dislike her, though I really like the way she's written as Power Ring. And I think Brian Hitch writes her character better in his Justice League series. I hope that Sam Humphries has a plan, and in the long run we will see character's growth and start appreciating his work more. And I wish that Frank Leminski was the protagonist in this book because he's a much more likable character than Simon or Jessica. Thank you for reading this and for responding to my other emails. I really appreciate it. Keep up your great work on the blog and the podcast, and I'm looking forward to listening to new episodes.
Well, thank you, Andre.
So, Andre's got some good moments, some good points about the whole green space thing, and we'll talk about a little bit about that when somebody else has got a question about the green space as well. But yeah, it was interesting for me, and what I liked about it was seeing characters like Kat Matui back again, and some of the characters that we really haven't seen in a while. And particularly, I like the sequence with Kat Matui talking to Hal about John, and Tomar Ray talking to Hal about his son Tomar too. Those things I thought were really, really nice, really neat moments. But, we saw some characters, and as we'll see in another email coming up, there are a lot of other ones still unaccounted for. And I do agree with Andre about Robert Venditti. I think he's doing a much better job with this than he is with the Green Lantern book. When he wrote the Green Lantern book, and he and I, when Robert Venditti was on last time, we had some conversation off mic, and I do think that Robert kind of got the short end of the stick in some ways, and that he may not have gotten to tell the stories the way he wanted to tell them. I agree, though. The whole emotional reservoir thing for me, I did not like that at all. To me, it flew in the face of what being a Green Lantern is about, and it's kind of been forgotten, and I kind of think it may be something that's going to continue to be forgotten. I'm not going to say anything more about the Green Lanterns book because you and I just talked about it and people already know what we think. But I think it's interesting that Andre does not find Jessica Cruz relatable, and he has reasons to relate to her. So I'm not sure why that is, but it just, I don't know, it proves to me that there has to be more to the character than just that. That has to be a reason why people are interested, and it
can't be their angle.
Right.
It sounds like it feels like more of it's trying to be a hook and less of an organic developing, of a character.
Right. And Andre, I really appreciate you re-listening to the episodes of the podcast. You've probably listened to them more than we have, and we recorded them. So more power to you, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate the loyalty, and I hope that you get something out of the shows that adds value to your experience as a fan, because that's why we're doing this. We're doing it because we love it. So again, thank you. And Bill, you want to read our next letter?
Sure. This letter is from Mike Francis. Hi, Myron and Bill. I hope you two are well, and thank you so much for all the excellent work you do. Well, thank you, Mike. The site and podcast are a big part of my GL fan experience. I apologize in advance for this being a long question. No problems. Myron, in episode 109, you mentioned that since Rebirth, you are buying fewer DC books. I am in the same boat, and in fact, I have dropped nearly all of my DC books, save Batman and Hal and the Corps, and have started picking up books from other publishers. There was nothing about Rebirth that I disliked, so your comment in the podcast got me thinking about why I'm buying fewer DC books. I have come to the conclusion that the reason I am notably less engaged with the DC comic universe is because of my perception that DC has placed Hal especially, but also the Corps in general, on the back burner. I love Hal and the Corps, but I find myself irritated by the lack of promotion this, in my opinion, superior book receives relative to the Green Lanterns book, which I have absolutely zero interest in. This led me to a question which I want to pose to both of you. Does the fact that there are so many human lanterns hurt the viability of the franchise? You'd also mentioned in episode 109 that perhaps people don't pick up an issue of Hal and the Corps if they don't think, quote-unquote, their lantern will be featured much. I've thought about doing that when it seems Hal won't be focused on much, but ultimately because I like Rob Venditti's writing and I want to support the book, I pick it up. So my question is, would it be better for the franchise to focus on one main lantern, though this would upset the fans of the characters who would be benched, perhaps down the road would lead to a more focused and unified fandom? In other words, would this decrease tribalism and GL fandom, which may ultimately be harmful? I'm not advocating for it, as I don't want anyone to miss out on their favorite character. Just think it might be an interesting question. Thanks again for all you do, Mike Francis. Well, thank you again, Mike, for that email. And we've talked about this for a while now. What's better, a lot of books, a few books, an anthology of stories? Do we go to one focus? I'm almost of, and I think I've stated my case before, Myron, is I'm of smaller better. Smaller, focusing it a little bit more is better. The Hal and Sinestro back and forth is great. Hal going out and being, rescuing people, focusing in on that. And I think you can have like an anthology with the Green Lantern Corps. What I would love are just shorter episodes of the Corps, like 1 to 2 one shots and like 2-issue series, arcs. I think would be something that could be, I think people would be more interested in, to know that I can pick up issue number 4 of a comic and fall in love with characters because I like these one-shot stories is a lot more appealing than me saying, okay, I got to wait this out and see if this story pays off. And I don't know. That's me. I think I like Hal Jordan and the Corps. I almost want to see a Hal Jordan and a Corps book. But that's my 2 cents.
I would co-sign with that, and Mike is a person that I believe he follows us on Twitter, and I think he's part of the Facebook group as well. But Mike and I are very similar in our thinking. I'm buying less Rebirth books, I think, less DC titles, because for whatever reason I feel less connected to the DC universe. And I haven't quite been able to put my finger on it. I've been trying to figure it out for a while. There was a time when I was buying at least half of the DC line, and now I'm only buying the Hal Jordan book in paper and digital, the Green Lanterns book in digital only, and then I'm buying the All-Star Batman book, the Titans book, and Wonder Woman, and that's it. And for me, that's really a departure, because I've been a DC guy for a long time. So I haven't quite put it on a finger on it myself. Would it be better if there was only one main lantern? I think it may be. I think the problem is at this stage of the game, it would be too difficult for the reasons that Mike points out, is that you've got tribalism in the Green Lantern fandom, and no matter which character you're gonna make the main one, pick any one of the 6. No matter which one you pick, you're going to have fans of 5 other characters that are going to be so ticked off that it's going to torpedo the book. I think that what we're seeing right now, if you look at the sales numbers, this is an article I've been working on for the blog of OA, and I'm almost ready to start writing it. I've been doing a lot of research into sales numbers. And the thing that came to my mind was, if I look at Rebirth, we're getting 4 Green Lantern books a month, 2 titles published twice a month. In New 52, we were also getting 4 books, but those 4 books starred, you had the Green Lantern book with Hal in it, you had the Green Lantern Corps book with Guy and John in it, and you had New Guardians with Kyle in it, and then you had a Red Lanterns book. How do those sales numbers compare when you're looking at 4 books a month with 2 books, 2 titles with 2 characters in one book and everybody else crammed in the other, versus when you had the characters more spread out in a monthly book? And it's interesting, the sales numbers for New 52 are higher than the first 6 months of Rebirth, which I thought was kind of interesting. I think Rebirth has been good for DC across the board, but the numbers for New 52 are significantly higher. So that was interesting. Now, to compare it to the end of New 52, Rebirth is definitely an improvement over where the New 52 books were at the end of the New 52. So it definitely was something that DC needed to do in some way. Whether Rebirth was exactly it or not, I don't know, but DC needed to do something. But it is interesting to compare New 52 to Rebirth and see that, there's really, from a Green Lantern book perspective, they're not getting the payoff that they thought they would. In fact, both series have dropped significantly in sales, and each issue is selling right around the 40 to 50,000 copy range, which isn't far off from where it was before. So I'm not sure. Would it be better if they did it a little bit differently? I'm with you, Bill. I would rather have seen a Green Lantern book with Hal in it and a Corps book, and have both those books be bi-weekly. But then what I would do is I'd have a backup story. So like the Green Lantern Corps book and the Green Lantern Corps book would both have 2 plots running it, and it would split the issue in half. In the old days, we used to have Tales of the Green Lantern Corps, a short mini story in the back of each issue of Green Lantern. I'd love to see something like that where a character who doesn't have a title of their own gets featured, whether it's Simon or Jessica, if we had to keep them around, or or Kyle gets a special story, or a character that that people love, like Rotlop Fan. Give him a story that's just a story with him in it, of him as a Green Lantern, him having an adventure. I think that would be, to me, what I'd be looking for. But I realize I'm just one voice amongst many, and there are people who like the way it is right now. It's interesting. I was a shop owner not too long ago, and I was asking him how the books were selling, and he said, he thinks, and in him talking to other store owners, they're still trying to figure out what the right number of issues are for some of these books, even 6 months later, because they're not settling into a solid pattern, and he believes that everybody's still over ordering books. So that's not a good sign. He's telling me that he's cut back his orders on both titles, but he's cut back more on the Green Lanterns book. He's not selling as many copies of Green Lanterns, physically selling them, than he is the Hal Jordan book. Why? I don't know, and I'm sure he wasn't saying that just to placate me, because he knows how I feel. But it's interesting. I'm not sure what would be the best thing. The problem we've got is we've got a franchise that seems to be, DC's wants to introduce a new character. What franchise can we tack it on to? Green Lantern seems like an easy one, and that's kind of been what's happened for the last 50 years. You started out with Hal, they added Guy. Guy was never intended to be a recurring character. He was designed, the original story was they showed how the ring could have gone to either Hal or Guy, and that Guy would have died, and it would have gone to Hal anyway. So the Guardians, that's how the ring chose Hal, was because it knew how it was going to play out. That's what Guy was designed for. He wasn't designed to stick around. He came back later, and they did some things with Guy because they saw some potential in having a second character. But I think what's happened over time is it's gotten watered down. And now you've got people who are diehard fans of one character or the other. And I know in just kind of some participation I have in message boards, there are people who skip an issue because, my favorite Lantern isn't in it. You've got Green Lantern fans who are interested in the core and all of the characters, and then you have Hal only fans, John only fans, Guy only fans, Kyle only fans, and so on. And that's where we have an issue, because you're never going to make them all happy, because it seems like when they all had their own book, eventually they got low numbers. I honestly feel, my own opinion is that DC really dropped the ball when Jeff Johns left. And I'm not blaming Jeff Johns. He was certainly entitled to leave, and the other creators were as well. But you had a franchise at that time that was selling better than Superman. This was the number 2 selling franchise for DC Comics, right behind Batman. And when they left, you brought writers on that didn't have a pedigree. So you had people that came on, and I'm not picking on anybody. I'm not trying to make it writers look diminish anybody's talent. But nobody knew who Robert Venditti was at that point. Nobody knew who Van Jensen was at that point. So you brought in writers that up to that point, Van Jensen had only written one book. He'd written Pinocchio the Vampire Slayer. So you've got somebody who never wrote a mainstream superhero book before. He's obviously not going to be a draw. How are you going to help keep fans energized? And I think DC really made a bad set of decisions by picking creators who didn't have a name. And I don't mean that to sound bad, but name brand writers. You didn't bring anybody in. You have Jeff Johns who made his biggest career. His Green Lantern will be forever connected with Jeff Johns because that's really where he made his name. Sure, he had a great Flash run, he had a great JSA run, but Green Lantern has been his big thing, his big claim to fame. You take a writer like that who's gotten big name brand recognition, and he leaves a book, and a lot of people left the series at that point. They left because Jeff Johns left, or they left because he left the franchise with a story, an ending that was so great that people were like, I don't need to read it anymore because I got the perfect ending. And you had a lot of people walk away. You didn't have anybody who created any buzz walking into it. So, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and I could see that definitely. But is there a part of you that, you've been reading Green Lantern for quite some time, and is there is this a natural ebb and
I
flow
think so.
kind of
I think that Green Lantern popularity comes and goes. You have a really good run, and then you kind of have some bumps in the road, and then you have some lean times, and then it comes back up again. It's very cyclical. And I think we're just in that phase right now where we've been on a decline and we're kind of holding steady, and maybe we've had some short-term gains, but we haven't had any long-term gains, and hopefully it'll get back. Will it ever be as popular as it was during Blackest Night? I don't know. Maybe optimistically in 2020 when the Green Lantern Corps movie comes out, maybe that'll create a surge of interest. I don't know. But it may never come again. It's hard to say. But that being said, we got 3 years.
Oh, we have 3 years.
We have another email, and this one is really well thought out. This is by Tyler Nunnally. And Tyler, I apologize if I slayed your last name. But Tyler is writing about Volthoom. And last episode, you and I were talking about some confusion between the Volthoom, who's the first Lantern, and the Volthoom who's tied to Earth 3. So Tyler's got a really good email, and he did include some graphic images from, that doesn't sound right, some pictures from past comics to go along with it, which obviously we can't share on an audio podcast, but you'll get the gist. Anyway, it says, Hiya Lanterns, great podcast. I enjoy hearing your reviews of Green Lantern comics and hearing you discuss them and the characters. I also wanted to pass along a theory I had concerning Volthoom, since it sounds like neither of you are sure which Volthoom is appearing in Green Lanterns. I believe Jess Johns was tying the source of the Earth 3 Power Ring's power into the main DCU, Earth Zero, I think, their Green Lantern Corps mythos, and that Volthoom the First Lantern is the same Volthoom who empowered the Power Ring of Earth 3. When Volthoom appeared on Oa in the aftermath of Krona's selfish attempt to view the origin of the universe, he was wearing a fancy astronaut-looking kind of outfit. Something that popped out to me was the American flag on the left side of his chest. The direction and colors of the stars and bars are reversed. So, in other words, there was a red field with a white star on it on the right-hand side of the flag, and blue and white stripes on the left-hand side of the flag. So he said the directions were reversed. I believe this indicates that Volthoom was from Earth 3 originally. I think this partially because of how Ultraman described Earth Zero. And there's a panel that says, the Earth 3 concerns him because the geography of the Earth was backwards and things at first appeared similar other than that, but obviously it turned out evil. Backwards geography, and we know good guys are bad guys and vice versa. Additionally, the Guardian said something that stuck out in my mind when Necron tried to whack the First Lantern. Basically, the Guardian said, we're free, we've been given a second chance, Volthoom has been eradicated, and his corrupted ring banished back to his universe. The First Lantern's Volthoom's corrupted power ring was sent to a different universe, which I think was Earth 3. Anyway, who knows when Volthoom's ring went back to his own universe. Maybe it traveled through time as well, as universe is trying to get away from Necron. More than enough time to keep moving through host of the Power Ring Core. My theory is that when Necron tried to kill Volthoom, he fled into his power ring like Hal Jordan seemed to recently, since he was so intimately tied into the emotional spectrum as the Guardians and now Hal Jordan is apparently. Anyway, when the Black Racer supposedly killed Volthoom, freeing Jessica Cruz, I think he only freed Volthoom from his power ring prison. Now Phantom Volthoom aims to use the Guardian, Leminski, and the Phantom Ring somehow to restore himself to corporeal form. That's my theories anyway. Shine light, bright lanterns, Tyler Nunnally. P.S. One small thing. I think the following was an art error, but it does potentially serve as counter evidence to the flag part of my theory. And that was a flashback, a Hal Jordan flashback during Forever Evil, which it shows Hal wearing a flag that looks very much like the regular flag. And it says, again, I think that's an art error and a flashback scene to the Power Ring of Earth 3's origin. But it seems fair to mention since my theory started because of a messed up flag on the first line of Volthoom chest. Also, the Seven Deadly Sins as the Pandora series looks a lot like First Lantern Volthoom's constructs and were colored as the Spectrum colors, but in just maybe coincidental art. So, Taylor, really, that's a great theory, and I think you are 100% right. I think that those are things that I never connected those dots, so I really applaud you. I thought that's great. That the Volthoom is the same Volthoom, and it makes sense for them to travel through time as well as space because we don't really know how it works. So kudos to you.
Well done. I'll have to go because usually my theories are either off or corrected by the solicitations that Myron so so thank you very much. Is it Nunnally?
I believe
Nunnally,
Taylor's last name is Nunnally, but I'm
Nunnally.
I'm trying to read it the way it's spelled, and I probably ruined it. I don't know.
Oh, I wouldn't worry too much. Well, thank you. All right, so we have another email from Jay Barry. And Jay Barry says, "Hey, guys, to add some context to the whole Callista thing, she was manipulating Kyle emotionally as part of the intentions of the Omega Men. At this point, he spent months a prisoner of the Omega Men. He's not got his ring and has been forced to watch atrocities happen while being unable to stop them. Would you blame him when someone gives him a chance to be a hero? I believe there's something in Carol's ring influencing her feelings for Kyle. As we saw in Green Lantern Corps, Vitality was conditioned to bury her anger toward John so that she had the love to fuel her ring. When she goes off with Kyle and New Guardians, Carol knows Al is too busy with the Corps to be in a relationship. My theory is that since Kyle can also wield the violet light, he seems more compatible in the perception of whatever influence Carol's ring has over her. After all, we see her use the emotional tether to locate Kyle before he goes beyond the source wall and obtains the life equation." Jay Barry. So, Jay, that's an interesting theory about like why Carol would have been drawn to Kyle, but we could also just remember too that Carol's Kyle's, a young stud, and, Carol's a red-blooded woman, so she was just like, hey, you know what, Hal, if you're not paying attention to all this, I'm getting me all that.
But Jay has a really good point. One of the things about the Star Sapphire ring is that she has to be emotionally connected to someone for the ring to work. So did she kind of fool herself into having feelings for Kyle, or did it occur naturally over time and the ring kind of just egged it on a little bit? Hard to say. I do think it's interesting that Kyle is back and Carol's not with him. So I don't know what exactly that all means. And it's interesting when we start talking about the Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps books that Kyle shows up and then he revives Hal. That Carol is not a subject that is brought up. They're focused on the mission at hand, but you got to wonder at some point if there's going to be some kind of a conversation. I know that Robert Venditti has plans to do something with Carol. I don't know what, but boy, it'll be interesting when that comes about. But I think Jay is correct in that Kyle wanted to be a hero and he was put in a tough situation and he needed somebody to latch onto. I don't know whether his feelings for Callista were true. I don't think they were. I think some of that was the Nightingale effect, or those kind of things where you're basically, you get emotional connections to people because you're in a tight situation and they're the only person around. But we'll see. Anyway, our last email is from Jason Hodge, and Jason is a member of our Facebook group as well. And his email says, "Happy holidays, Myron and Bill. And Hal Jordan number 10, Hal despairs over the loss of John, Guy, and the Corps, whom he believes are dead. Abin Sur tells Hal that the Corps is not in Emerald Space. Shouldn't there be an additional 6,000 plus lanterns recently added to that space due to the events of Lost Army and Edge of Oblivion? Of course, Ed Benes cannot draw that many lanterns, but still acknowledging Lost Army and Edge of Oblivion would be appropriate. Sincerely, Jason Hodge." Jason's right. One of the things I was thinking about when I was reading that sequence is, boy, there should be a whole lot more people than what we're seeing. And maybe we were only in one part of the Emerald Space. There was one thing that did connect back to Lost Army and Edge of Oblivion, and that's Muck Muck. Muck Buck is, I almost said, did I say Buck Buck? Buck number one. Yeah. Muck Muck was in a panel. That was about it. He was in a panel in the background behind Jack T. Chance when Hal was in Emerald Space and Green Lantern Corps, Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps number 10. But that was really the only reference to it. And it's almost like the whole Lost Army Edge of Oblivion thing has kind of been forgotten. But we know that the Green Lantern Corps is depleted. There should be more in Emerald Space. Why aren't they there? I don't know. There's an interesting line in Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps number 11 where Ganthet wonders whether what Hal saw was real, or was this Hal's mind creating a reality for him as he was struggling to deal with what was happening to him. Don't know. It'd be interesting to see if this is something that gets picked up on later, because as we talked about earlier, there was a time when Sinestro and Hal were in Black Hand's ring, and we saw some similar characters. Don't know. It's the nature of life after life, I guess.
Sounds like an 80s song. Life after life. Well, thank you, Jason, and happy holidays to you.
So thank you, everybody, for your emails. It was great to get that many responses. We love hearing what you have to say and your theories about things. And, please keep it going.
This is Giancarlo Volpe, producer of Green Lantern, the animated series, and you're listening to the podcast of Oa.
So, Myra, we're going to talk about Hal Jordan and Green Lantern Corps issues 10 and 11. And we get a nice little twist on the Brainiac story, and we see that Kyle Rayner is back and plays a real big part here in bringing Hal back from the green space, which seems like a Valhalla of the Green Lanterns. And we've talked previously in the podcast about the green space, and we're going to probably get in a little bit more depth there. But overall, what was your thoughts of these last couple issues?
I really enjoyed them. First of all, issue number 10, you'll notice that was originally solicited with Ethan Van Sciver on art, and we get Ed Benes instead. And Ethan Van Sciver commented on social media that he fell behind and couldn't meet the deadline, so that's why Ed Benes did the artwork. But Ed stepped in, and when I saw his name on the cover, at first I was a little concerned because Ed has a tendency to draw his women a little. I don't know how to put this, but when he did Red Lanterns, there was a lot of cheeky art, if you know what I mean. But he does a really good job in this issue, this first issue, and we see John and Sornik Natu still at odds with each other, and I think if there was anything about this arc, that part I thought was good. But then when you see how it turns out in issue 11, I was kind of like, oh well, you're not fooling us by making them fight. Because you figured out that's John's plan. But anyway, overall I really enjoyed the story. The parts where Kyle shows up and talks to Sade and Ganthet, and they go, he goes and he rescues Hal. To me, that was the most entertaining part, because I liked seeing Hal in the green space. I liked, as I said earlier, I liked seeing him interact with Abin Sur. I liked seeing him in the whole conversation with Kat Matui and the conversation with Tomar Ray. Those things were really, to me, I connected with them due to my history with the characters. And Bill, do you know who Kat Matui is?
No, I'm sorry. I'm mixing her up with Fatality. I was thinking, didn't Jon Stewart blow up her world? But no.
No, but she has a strong connection to Jon Stewart. So the reason why I asked the question wasn't to put you on the spot, but because I imagine there are readers who may not know who Kat Matui is. And Kat Matui was a young Korugurian girl who led a resistance against Sinestro. And when Sinestro was taken away when he was kicked out of the Green Lantern Corps, she was his successor. And she's the one who found Ralop Fan and trained him. She eventually married Jon Stewart and was killed by Star Sapphire. So that's how she ends up in Green Spaces. She was killed by Carol Ferris.
Ah.
So
Carol is dangerous and beautiful.
It was a case of, how there's an entity for each one of the Corps. Well, the entity for the Star Sapphires is the Predator. And the Predator was, at the time, was in control of Carol, much like Hal was possessed by Parallax. And it was the Predator that actually did it was Carol in body only. But,
it seems like, I don't think they go by her name, but I think my first introduction with any kind of Star Sapphire was through, I think, the Justice League cartoons, where they played her as a bad villain. Yeah.
Originally, Carol was possessed by the Star Sapphire, and she wasn't in control. So the dynamic was that Hal had a villain that he really didn't want to fight, because it was Carol Ferris, once he found out who it was. And she was being manipulated by the Star Sapphire. And over time, as prolonged exposure, she's becoming able to be controlled by it. It goes back to the whole Jeff Johns theory of the emotional spectrum. The further you are away from the center, the more the emotion controls you than you control it. Carol, because of her prolonged exposure to the Star Sapphire, has more control over it than other people do. So that's kind of the backstory of Kat Matui. And for me, that was really neat to see. I really like that part. I wish it was longer, to be quite honest, but it served its purpose enough for Abin Sur to let Hal know that he needs to go out and find the Blue Lanterns and revive that core. And you see Kyle struggle, and he brings Hal back. I especially the visual when you see Hal in green space, his hand disappearing, and in our space, seeing his skeletal hand come out of the little fissure in space there was really, really cool. I really liked the visual. I thought it was done very well.
No, that was a great visual, but there was that one, there was a kind of a corny, it's really drawn well and everything, but the handshake and Hal's arm is up and
the fist bump.
Yeah. But do you think they still make Hal look very young? I don't know if that was just the green space kind of.
I think it depends on who draws him. I think when Ethan draws him, he looks very much like he did in Rebirth. But I think you get other artist takes, and sometimes he looks younger. Billy Tan really made Hal look way too young.
Yeah, very much so.
Ethan, I think, has the best grasp on it because he's got so much time with the character. I think Ed Benes makes him look a little youngish. It looks like he got a haircut while he was in green space.
Abin Sur is let me handle that for you.
me with the no hair. I want to cut your hair.
Yeah.
Abin Sur had a Flowbee in the green space.
Yeah, never go to a bald barber.
Yeah. Were you surprised at all by the reveal of Larfleeze?
I don't want to say surprise. Let's put it this way: it was one of those that it made sense when I saw it. The first time when I started hearing Collector, it was kind of hinting at it. It's that, when I saw it, I was like, oh, I was kind of I was happy that it was. So yeah, I guess maybe more serendipitous. It was pleasant. I was pleasantly surprised, but not. I wasn't it wasn't. I didn't think it was a huge twist. If
right.
That's where you were going with that.
Yeah. It wasn't an M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong kind of twist.
No, it was not.
But it was nice to see him back. There's no explanation as to how he got his ring back, because if we recall, the last time we saw Larfleeze was during Godhead, and they took his ring and it was on Mogo. But somewhere along the way, he's gotten his ring back. I do like in issue 11 where they kind of Robert gives you the backstory as to how Larfleeze gets his hands on Brainiac and kind of manipulates him and puts him under his control. I also like the fact that this Larfleeze is not the corny Larfleeze. There's still some humor to him, but he's like Gollum. He can be humorous in one regard, but he can also be a huge threat the next minute.
Well, and he can have a discussion with you for the most part. Yeah. I wondered how he was controlling Brainiac though. Because Larfleeze, it's almost like he captures the entities or the souls of whoever. I'm not sure if I'm describing it exactly how it does, but those orange constructs are people he's generally defeated.
Correct.
And so he basically has an army in a ring. Right. So I'm either wondering if there was a being that he got that could manipulate some kind of higher intelligence AI Brainiac, or that was just more of an interesting take, but it made sense. It was a nice story. It was a nice flow to the story of how they were going to get out. And it just played out very well. And I think that's what sometimes if you had to compare this title with the other title, Green Lanterns, this is what I think just intrigues me more. I think this is just more entertaining of a read.
Yeah, definitely. It's high adventure. It's fun escapism entertainment. It's the Star Wars of superheroes. It really is.
Yeah.
Now, there was an interesting scene. It only was a panel in issue 11, But what do you think about the moment when Tomar 2 is talking to his mother, and he says, "Have no fear, my fellow Zudarians, the Green Lantern Corps will protect you." And his mother says, "Your father used to say such things, Tomar 2, before being a Green Lantern got him killed."
Right, yeah. So, like, you didn't know. Yeah, it was such an odd, out of place, kind of weird. You felt like, and we mentioned this off when we were recording. It felt like it was like marking that this might be something bigger.
Yeah, just in talking with Robert Venditti and seeing how he tells a story, he likes to tell stories over the long term, and I don't see him wasting a panel like that. So to me, much like Jeff Johns, when you see a panel that seems a little out of place, you kind of start to wonder, there's got to be more to it than that, So, is Tomar 2 going to have a crisis of faith? Well, will he decide that maybe being a Green Lantern is not the right thing for him? I think it would be cool.
Or is his mother just like, pushy and likes to drink the wine a little too much?
One of the things that I hope happens is when the dust settles a little bit, that Hal gets to talk to Tomar 2 and John Stewart about about those conversations he had in the green space. So I'm hoping that if Tomar 2 has that crisis of faith I mentioned, that Hal is able to talk to him about what his father said to him while he was in the green space. That's where I think it's going. But, what do I know? But
a lot. But I don't know about that.
I liked in particular the spot where Hal is talking to the Guardians and Kyle, and he can't look him in the eye. He's looking down and saying, I found the core, just not a living one, and mission not really accomplished. And you see him go from that to he discovers that the Green Lantern Corps are back again thanks to Ganthet, and he's so excited he takes off, and he's so happy. And then he gets to Mogo, and he wants to hug a tree, and he's shouting out for Kilowog, which I thought was great, a great callback to that scene when Hal did the whole Renegade storyline, and he had to fight Kilowog to leave Oa. I thought that was great. Not Oa, but Mogo. I thought that was great.
It was more reminiscent of like It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Wonderful Lantern's life as he was running through Mogo.
Yeah. Oh, and to go back to that Tomar 2 thing, there was another panel about that later on that his mother says, this is why I hoped you would not repeat your father's choices. And Tomar 2 says, "Mother, you don't." And then she interrupts him and says, "Do you see how being a Green Lantern threatens all that you love?" So I definitely think that's going somewhere.
Talk about a guilt trip.
Yeah, really. I mean, come on.
Come on, Mom. No, I think it was nice to see Hal Jordan back and everything, but I think we need to see what the conclusion is. Also, I wonder how Brainiac got to, Akara.
Yeah, he was in the
right?
He was in the stash of toys that Larfleeze had been collecting, and he didn't realize he had Brainiac there.
Yeah, but you would almost wonder how Brainiac. It must have been after being defeated or a Brainiac bot. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
But again, nice little. I would say nice little way to kind of bring back Larfleeze into the mix, in an appropriate way and a way that you can enjoy him, not giving him his own series or anything of that nature.
Yeah, and I enjoyed how John Stewart and Hal both were the Larfree and Fleas. I thought was funny. But they both said the same thing.
I liked John Stewart's kind of like smile, like that was like almost the first time you saw him like relax.
Isn't it though? I thought that was nice to see that, because he's always such a stoic, stern. I don't want to say stern, but such a serious character, that it was nice to see him smile when he realized that, and he realized how to get out of the situation. I thought it was good, strong character development for him.
Right. No. Again, he's always like, it's a dangerous character, but it's a character that you can slap around and manipulate if you really wanted to.
Yeah. I thought it was great that John saw Larfleeze's weakness for what it was and knew exactly how to manipulate it. I think that's great. So, I really liked both issues. I thought they were done really well. A couple little things here and there, but, really little things. overall.
I don't give an iota about that. No, sorry.
I know that.
Quoting a Guardian, that was a little.
Some of the dialogue was a little. I don't want to say stiff, but a little stiff is the best word I can think of.
A little bit, but again, that's me nitpicking, just being a jerk. Robert Venditti, sorry. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited for this thing.
No, I think it's going in the right direction. Venditti definitely, I think, does a great job of balancing all the characters. For being a Hal Jordan book, we've seen a hell of a lot more of all other familiar characters, and they've been given equal time and time that, like quality time. Not so much quantity as it is quality.
Agreed. I think Venditti's doing a really good job. We've said it before in other episodes, but I think he's doing a really good job of having a cast of this size and really giving each one of them their due. They're each given, even if it's only a moment or two, they're quality moments, and I think that speaks to his quality as a writer.
Well, I wonder if Rebirth gives him some more freedoms that he may not have had picking it up right from Johns.
Yes. In a nutshell, he's basically got the entire sandbox to play with, and nobody else is doing anything with these characters, so he's got free reign right now, which is something he didn't have before.
And that's a benefit to any writer. You got freedom.
Exactly. So. Good stuff.
What up, dweebs? This is Guy Gardner. You're listening to the podcast of OA.
So, Myron, we covered the Green Lanterns 13 and 14, and the Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps 10 and 11, and also a ton of fan mail. It's becoming unbearable. The outpour. But but very thoughtful, thought-provoking emails that we're very appreciative. So, 110 episodes, and we're just chugging along here, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a special episode we're recording later this month with Mike Johnson, who is the writer of the Star Trek Green Lantern crossover. He's going to be back, and we're going to talk about the first 2 issues of that series and maybe try to find out a little bit about where it's going. And then you and I are also working on recording an audio commentary track for the Green Lantern motion picture with someone who worked on the film. So we've got some really cool stuff on the horizon.
And it doesn't rhyme with Ian Reynolds.
No.
Yeah, he just happened to be swinging through Elmira.
Yeah, he was just driving through the area, and said, "Hey, I heard you guys do a podcast."
But I believe Ryan Reynolds was just in the news talking about the Green Lantern, the movie, and how appreciative he was to have that role. Yeah,
he was, and I think he understood a little bit about what he was getting into, but I don't think I think at the time when it got negative reaction, I think he lashed out a little bit, just because it was probably hard on his ego to hear some of the negativity. But at the same time, he said it was a good experience overall, and geez, he got a hot wife out of it too. So
hey, if that's all we need in life. No, I think I think he was even attributing, because of that, allowed him to finally get to Deadpool.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So hey, see, everything works out for a reason.
That's
so.
Right.
With that, we're gonna close up episode 110, and we're gonna be back here with some more episodes and the Star Trek interview coming up, and hopefully audio commentary to look forward to.
Absolutely. So until next time, treat each other well, keep your rings charged, and make every day your brightest day. Thanks. Take care, guys. The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. And Skype users can leave a voicemail on the show's account, Blog of OA. Emails can be sent to greenlantern@stny.rr.com. And you can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Facebook and Google+. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The blog of OA and the podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.